Hi, today we're going to talk about the very important but often overlooked process of validating your site. And what I mean by that is it's time for us to check your code. So why do we want to validate? I like to call browsers the helicopter parents of programming. So a lot of times you're going to be writing up your code and then you'll stop and you'll check and it looks great, and then you write some more code and you stop and you check and it looks great. And by the sheer fact that it looks so good, you assume you must be right. But the problem is browsers are programmed to kind of look for your errors and fix them. The problem with this is that not all browsers fix things the same way. It's also important to remember that not everyone is accessing your page with traditional browsers. So as your page becomes more complex, these little hidden problems, those hidden errors that the browsers are hiding can become devastating to people who are trying to access them with different software. So there are three approaches to validating your code for consistency. One is to validate what we call the URI or the URL. Another is to validate by your file name, which means instead of giving your URL, you can actually upload your file to check it. The third way is what I call by direct input. So let's go ahead and run through an example very quickly. And the site I'm going to use is called the Validator. So if you check here, we can start off by going to the validator.w3.org. As you can remember, the W3 is really the association for trying to make sure that everyone sticks to the same standards. And here are three options. We can validate by URI, the validate by file upload, and the validate by direct input. Now, this is a somewhat important choice because for some of you, you may not decide to buy a hosting system, in which case you can't actually give it your URL. You can't type in c://. It just doesn't work when you put anything that's specific to your computer. So instead, I'm going to show you an example of validate by direct input. All right? So let's start by looking at the page we're going to validate. Over here, I have my little picture of Asheville with the beach. And as you can see, it looks pretty good. You don't see any problems with it as you kind of go back and forth. But let's see what happens when I actually grab all this code. So if you want the shortcut, this works for almost everyone. I'm going to go ahead and do Control-A and Control-C. Head back over here, and when I put it in and I click on check, once I start going down, you can see, oh, this looks good. Oh, right away it says, nope, you have an error. And the error is stray end tag, and that's for a section. In most cases, the validators can kind of give you a clue as to which line you messed up on. So let's go back and check the code. When I go over here and I go down to line 25, oops, go up a little bit here. Nope, still nothing there. Got really long lines. Oh, the validator was right. As you can see, I accidentally put section twice. What I really meant was to have an end section here and a beginning section here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. I will save. I will grab it all again. And let's try it by putting in new input. I'm actually going to refresh. Go back here. And let's see if I have better luck this time. Good, good. No errors or warnings to show, and it's going to go ahead and put my page back out there. So this is really just the simplest way to go in and make sure that the syntax of your code is correct. Now, I kind of gave you a really simple example where I only had one error. What typically is going to happen is that it's going to generate lots and lots of errors. And what I want to happen is make sure that you don't freak out when you see all of them. The reason is because errors, what we call, is propagate. The checker gets confused. When you see one error at the top, it kind of leads to a whole bunch of errors. So what you want to do is you always want to fix the first error that the validator saw. Once you fix that, there's a really good chance that the 52 errors it detected has now dropped down to 12 or 11. Now, there's also the chance that once you fix one error, it's going to be able to see that you had 20 or 30 more. But again, work on it step by step. If the error that the validator gives you isn't as clear as the one that I just saw, what you can do is search online and in the different forums, because I can assure you that other people have seen the same errors before. So what you want to do right now, actually let's go back here, is let's go ahead and try validate file by URI. Pick your favorite site and go ahead and type it in. I'm going to go ahead and put in, not my own because I'm pretty sure it validates. I will put in http www.umsi.umich.edu. So my boss can get mad at me when I show his site potentially doesn't validate. Well, right away you can see that it's going to find a lot of errors. no matter what site you put in, particularly if it's a very popular site, you're going to see that there are a lot of errors and that the sites don't validate. Let's make sure your sites are better than theirs. So it's one thing to validate for what we call syntax. It's another question to validate for what we call accessibility. Again, we've talked about how important it is to make sure that your sites are accessible to the greatest number of people. So one of the places you can go to check that is wave.webaim.org. And it's a site for you to go and validate your accessibility. So let's take a look at that one again. I go up here and I go to wave.webaccessibility. What you need to do here is you can't upload your code by file or just by the code itself. You need to put in a URL. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that same one we did before, which was the beaches, and put it in here. And you can see I didn't get any errors, but I did get a couple of alerts. And the alerts were simply telling me that I'm not sure your alternative text is quite as good as it should be. And also another point is saying you have the same redundant link, which means you have the same link twice. So right now everything looks good as far as syntax and the very high level of accessibility for the semantics. So one of the nice things about the accessibility validation is that it gives you an idea of things that you hadn't really thought about before, but the downfall is that it only works on hosted pages. So validated sites are always more robust and more accessible than those sites that don't validate. So as a coder, it's your job to make sure that you go to these different validation sites and fix your code to be up to standards. If you're not coding, it's also important for you to visit the sites that you go to on a regular basis and go ahead and validate those. It's going to give you a real sense of the different ways people feel the importance or non-importance of making their sites accessible to everybody. Good luck.